Maria, a 35-year-old marketing executive, arrived at the emergency room with symptoms that could only be described as alarming. Her body was trembling uncontrollably, her heart racing as if it were trying to escape her chest, and she couldn't stop pacing, her eyes wide with anxiety. The medical staff noticed her profuse sweating and the jittery way she spoke, words tumbling out of her mouth in a rapid, disjointed stream. It was clear something was seriously wrong. Her colleague, who had accompanied her to the hospital, explained the situation. Maria had consumed approximately 4 liters of coffee over the course of the day in a desperate attempt to meet a looming work deadline. What had started as a simple strategy to stay awake and alert had spiraled into a dangerous overconsumption of caffeine. Maria had always been a high achiever, known for her ability to juggle multiple projects with ease. Her daily routine was intense, often leaving little room for rest. Coffee had become her constant companion, a tool she relied on to keep going during long hours at the office. Over time, her tolerance for caffeine had increased, leading her to consume more than the average person would ever consider. This particular day had been exceptionally stressful, with a major presentation deadline that required every ounce of her focus and energy. As the hours ticked by, Maria found herself reaching for cup after cup, unaware of the impending toll this would take on her body. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. Her symptoms had escalated rapidly, and she knew she needed help. Upon her arrival at the hospital, Maria was immediately ushered into a treatment room where the medical team began their assessments. Her vital signs were concerning. Her blood pressure was elevated, her heart rate was dangerously high, and her pupils were dilated. As they performed a physical examination, they noted her heightened reflexes and visible tremors. It was evident that Maria was suffering from severe caffeine intoxication, a condition that could have serious, even life-threatening consequences if not addressed promptly. Initial diagnostic tests, including blood work and an electrocardiogram, ECG, were ordered to assess the full extent of her condition. The situation was critical, and the medical team knew they had to act quickly to stabilize her and prevent any further complications. The initial tests confirmed what the doctors had suspected. Maria's caffeine levels were dangerously high, well beyond what a healthy body could metabolize in a day. The ECG revealed her heart was under immense strain, beating erratically as it struggled to cope with the flood of stimulants coursing through her system. Despite her general good health and absence of prior heart conditions, Maria's body was reaching its limits. As the doctors reviewed her medical history, they found no underlying conditions that would have predisposed her to such severe reactions. Yet her symptoms were alarming. Her family was contacted, and her mother, who had always worried about Maria's intense work habits, rushed to the hospital to provide more context about her lifestyle. Maria's mother confirmed that her daughter had no history of heart disease or other chronic conditions. However, she did mention that Maria had always been prone to anxiety, a fact that may have played a role in her rapid heart rate and heightened state of agitation. Maria's mother described how, over the past few months, work stress had taken a toll on her daughter. The increasing demands at her job had led Maria to consume more coffee than usual, a habit she thought was harmless, but had now spiraled out of control. The doctors listened carefully, considering how the combination of stress and excessive caffeine consumption could have triggered such an intense response in Maria's nervous system. The conversation painted a clearer picture of the factors contributing to her condition. As the medical team worked to stabilize Maria, they continued to monitor her closely. Her tremors persisted, and despite being given medications to calm her racing heart, her anxiety remained palpable. To fully understand the scope of what was happening, the doctors decided to run additional tests. Blood samples were sent to measure not just her caffeine levels, but also her electrolyte balance and other indicators of metabolic function. A toxicology screen was also ordered to rule out the possibility of other substances in her system. The next steps were crucial, as the team needed to decide whether more aggressive treatments, such as sedation or intravenous medication, would be necessary to bring her body back to a state of equilibrium. The race against time had begun, and the medical staff knew every second counted. As Maria lay in the hospital bed, the results of the additional tests began to trickle in. each one confirming the severity of her condition. The toxicology report ruled out any other substances, reinforcing the diagnosis of acute caffeine intoxication. Her electrolyte levels were abnormal, indicative of the dehydration that often accompanies excessive caffeine consumption. The medical team noted that her potassium levels were particularly low, a concerning sign given its critical role in heart function. This electrolyte imbalance further compounded the stress on Maria's cardiovascular system, heightening the risk of arrhythmias and other potentially life-threatening complications. The doctors decided it was time to move forward with more aggressive interventions. Maria was placed on intravenous fluids to help flush the caffeine from her system and correct her electrolyte imbalances. A beta blocker was administered to manage her tachycardia, aiming to bring her heart rate down to a safer level. The team also considered the use of a sedative to calm her persistent agitation and prevent any further strain on her heart. Throughout this process, Maria's mother remained by her side, watching anxiously as the doctors worked. The gravity of the situation was clear, and the medical team was determined to stabilize Maria as quickly as possible. Despite their efforts, Maria's condition remained precarious, her body teetering on the edge as it fought to recover from the caffeine overdose. In the midst of these medical interventions, something unexpected occurred. During a routine check of Maria's heart function, the cardiologist noticed an irregularity that hadn't been detected before. Further examination revealed a previously undiagnosed condition, a mild form of cardiomyopathy. This discovery was a turning point in Maria's case. The excessive caffeine had exacerbated this underlying heart condition, which had gone unnoticed in previous checkups due to its subtle nature. The realization that Maria's heart was more vulnerable than anyone had known added a new layer of complexity to her treatment. The team now had to carefully balance the need to manage the caffeine toxicity while also addressing the newly discovered heart issue. This revelation shifted the focus of Maria's care, emphasizing the importance of monitoring her heart function closely as they continued to treat her. The discovery of Maria's underlying cardiomyopathy brought a new urgency to her treatment plan. The cardiologist, now fully engaged in her care, explained to Maria and her mother that while the condition was mild, it could have serious implications if not managed properly, especially in the context of her current caffeine overdose. Cardiomyopathy affects the heart muscle, making it more difficult for the heart to pump blood effectively. This explained why Maria's heart had reacted so severely to the caffeine, which had overstimulated an already compromised system. The team decided to adjust her treatment plan accordingly, adding specific heart medications to support her cardiac function and prevent further complications. Maria, although exhausted and still trembling, listened intently as the cardiologist described her condition. The news was overwhelming. She had never considered that something could be wrong with her heart. The doctors reassured her that with proper management, her condition was treatable, but they also emphasized the importance of lifestyle changes moving forward. This included a significant reduction in her caffeine intake, regular monitoring of her heart function, and potentially even changes to her work routine to reduce stress. For Maria, who had always thrived on high-pressure situations, this was a difficult reality to face. The thought of slowing down, of taking a step back from the relentless pace she had maintained for years, was almost as daunting as the diagnosis itself. As the hours passed, the combined treatments began to take effect. Maria's heart rate gradually decreased, her blood pressure stabilized, and the tremors that had racked her body subsided. The intravenous fluids helped to clear the excess caffeine from her system, and the electrolyte imbalances were corrected with careful monitoring. The medical team, while cautiously optimistic, knew that Maria was not out of the woods yet. They would need to keep her under close observation for the next 24 hours to ensure that no new complications arose, particularly with her newly discovered heart condition. Maria, too exhausted to worry anymore, allowed herself to relax for the first time since she had arrived at the hospital. As she drifted into a restless sleep, the weight of the day's events settled in, a sobering reminder of the fragility of life and the unexpected consequences of what had once seemed like a harmless habit. The next morning, Maria awoke to the soft beeping of the heart monitor beside her bed, a constant reminder of the precarious situation she had found herself in. The medical team had been vigilant throughout the night, closely monitoring her heart function and vital signs. Maria felt weaker than usual, a stark contrast to her typically energetic self. Her body was slowly coming down from the intense stress it had been under, but the reality of her condition weighed heavily on her mind. The doctors entered her room with a sense of cautious optimism. Maria's vital signs had remained stable, and the immediate danger appeared to be subsiding. However, they emphasized that this was only the beginning of her recovery journey. The cardiologist returned to discuss the next steps with Maria and her mother. It was clear that the events of the previous day had been a wake-up call, both for Maria and for the medical team. The cardiologist explained that while the caffeine overdose had been a critical incident, the real focus now needed to be on managing her newly diagnosed cardiomyopathy. This condition, while manageable, would require significant changes in Maria's lifestyle. The doctor recommended that Maria undergo regular cardiac evaluations to monitor her heart function and suggested starting a regimen of medications designed to support her heart and prevent any future episodes of arrhythmia or heart failure. Maria was also advised to reduce her caffeine intake drastically and to find healthier ways to manage the stress that had driven her to consume such excessive amounts in the first place. Maria listened quietly, absorbing the gravity of what she was being told. The implications of her diagnosis were sinking in. She would have to make changes that she had never anticipated. The cardiologist spoke compassionately but firmly, emphasizing the importance of adherence to the treatment plan. They discussed the potential risks if the condition was not managed properly, including the possibility of more severe heart issues in the future. Maria realized that she could no longer afford to push her body to its limits as she had in the past. It was time to prioritize her health and well-being over the demands of her job. As the conversation ended, Maria felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear of the unknown future with her heart condition, but relief that she had been given a second chance to take control of her health before it was too late. As Maria settled into the hospital's rhythm, the reality of her situation began to crystallize. The once bustling, high-energy lifestyle she had known was no longer sustainable. The cardiologist had made it clear that while her condition was currently manageable, any future lapses in care could lead to far more severe outcomes. This realization weighed heavily on Maria's mind as she contemplated the changes she would need to make. The first and most obvious was her relationship with caffeine. The very substance she had relied on for years as a productivity booster had turned out to be her body's worst enemy. She knew that giving up coffee wouldn't be easy, but the thought of another episode like the one she had just experienced was more than enough motivation. The days following her initial treatment were filled with consultations and education. Maria met with a dietitian who provided her with guidelines for a heart-healthy diet, emphasizing the importance of reducing not just caffeine, but also salt, fat, and sugar. The idea of modifying her diet was daunting. After all, Maria had always prided herself on being able to eat whatever she wanted thanks to her fast-paced metabolism. But now, she had to confront the fact that her internal health was far more critical than her external appearance. The dietitian worked with Maria to create a plan that was both realistic and sustainable, focusing on gradual changes that would lead to long-term benefits. This included integrating more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains into her meals, as well as finding alternative sources of energy that wouldn't put her heart at risk. In addition to dietary changes, Maria was also introduced to the concept of stress management. Her frantic work life had left little room for relaxation, and it was clear that this imbalance had played a significant role in her recent health crisis. The hospital's mental health specialist introduced her to various techniques that could help her manage stress more effectively, such as mindfulness, meditation, and gentle exercise like yoga. These were foreign concepts to Maria, who had always been more focused on deadlines and deliverables than on her own mental well-being. Yet, as she listened to the advice, she realized that if she wanted to maintain her career and avoid future health problems, she would need to embrace these new practices. The process of healing, both physically and mentally, was just beginning, and Maria understood that it would require patience, commitment, and a willingness to change her deeply ingrained habits. As Maria continued her stay in the hospital, the days took on a reflective quality. She found herself reevaluating not only her physical health, but also her life choices that had led her to this point. The quiet moments between consultations and treatments allowed her time to think deeply about the kind of life she wanted moving forward. She had always been driven by her career, pushing herself to achieve more, climb higher, and outdo her own expectations. Yet, as she lay in a hospital bed, Maria began to realize that her relentless pursuit of success had come at a significant cost. The near-fatal encounter with caffeine toxicity and the discovery of her underlying heart condition were stark reminders that she could no longer afford to neglect her health. During one of her daily visits, Maria's mother brought up the idea of taking a step back from work, at least temporarily, to focus on her recovery. At first, Maria resisted the suggestion. The thought of stepping away from her responsibilities filled her with anxiety. What would happen to her projects? How would her colleagues manage without her? But as the conversation progressed, Maria started to see the wisdom in her mother's words. Her body had clearly been sending her signals that she had ignored for too long. Maybe it was time to listen. Taking a break didn't mean giving up. It meant prioritizing her well-being so that she could return to her career stronger and more balanced. This perspective shift was not easy for Maria, but the more she considered it, the more it made sense. By the end of her hospital stay, Maria had made a decision. She would speak with her employer about taking a medical leave of absence, giving her the time she needed to recover fully and implement the lifestyle changes her doctors had recommended. This decision, while difficult, felt like the right one. It wasn't just about getting healthy. It was about rethinking how she approached her life as a whole. Maria knew that her future depended on finding a sustainable balance between her ambitions and her health. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. With a newfound resolve, Maria left the hospital, not just as a patient discharged from care, but as a person ready to take control of her life in a more mindful and balanced way. I want to remind you not to forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you these stories. And don't miss out on the next chapter of our journey. Just click on the video appearing on your screen to watch the next story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.